Tonight's journey is not just a story. It's a test of how long your mind can survive the Arctic night. Before we step into this frozen world, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Doe's Dynasty, and drop a comment so this adventure reaches more night travelers like you. Hi guys. Tonight we step gently into a world where winter drifts in early, soft at first, then suddenly sharp, covering the earth in a stillness that feels both peaceful and threatening. You stand at the edge of a muddy medieval field, the last stalks of late autumn barley, brushing your legs as a thin frost glitters over everything. Your breath curls into the dim air like a ghost deciding whether to stay or slip away. People around you hurry with quiet urgency, carrying baskets, pulling reluctant animals, glancing up at a sky that seems to promise a long season of hardship. And while you might imagine yourself bundled in some modern insulated coat, you probably will not survive this kind of cold if you actually had to face it with the tools and clothing they used. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights and you let the story glide forward as days shorten and survival begins to nibble at every thought. You walk along the edge of a small settlement, hearing the crunch of the earth stiffen beneath your boots. It is not quite winter yet, but the cold has already begun its quiet rehearsal. Livestock bleats anxiously as villagers herd them toward pens that have been reinforced with fresh bundles of straw. A mainstream historical fact often mentioned by scholars is that most medieval European communities faced winters without reliable heating except for a single hearth and whatever body heat people could gather. It is a detail that becomes painfully obvious as you pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The wind feels confident now. No longer a gentle suggestion of cold, but more like a firm hand pressing against your skin. As you watch these preparations, someone hauls an armful of firewood past you. The pile looks impressive for a moment, then you realize it is barely enough for a few weeks. That is the rhythm of this season. Everything is measured not in comfort, but in survival. You glance toward a cottage where fresh thatch has been laid over the roof, golden against the pale sky. You catch the scent of damp leaves and wood sap, blending with the faint smell of smoke escaping from a crooked chimney. A small dog trots by, its coat dusted with frost, and you wonder how warm it can ever feel in weather like this. There is a quirky historical tidbit often whispered in old anecdotes that villagers sometimes stuff their clothes with raw wool not yet spun into thread. It sits oddly, puffing them up slightly, almost turning them into human-shaped hay bales. You notice one such figure passing near you, bundled so thoroughly that only a red nose peeks out between layers. They wave, then hurry on, cradling a ceramic pot that clinks softly with whatever precious thing they are protecting from the cold. The whole town seems to understand a truth you are only now absorbing. Winter is not an event. It is a presence, a long conversation with nature that you cannot interrupt. You walk past the open field where children are gathering the last fallen branches. Their laughter rings lightly, but their parents watch with tightened brows. Even the cheerful energy of youth bends before the seriousness of the coming season. The air holds a mix of hope and dread, and you feel it in your chest as if your own ribcage is a wooden door, trembling before the first gust. Historians still argue whether medieval people fully understood the cyclical patterns of harsh winters or simply endured them as best they could, without expecting change or justice from the elements. You can feel that uncertainty in the way villagers move. They prepare diligently, yet each gesture hints at resignation. No matter how ready they feel, winter will always have the last word. You pause near a low stone wall where an older woman sits, sorting dried beans into small cloth bags. Her hands are cracked from long hours in the cold, but they move with steady precision. She glances up at you with a knowing smile that somehow blends warmth and warning. Behind her, the door to her cottage is propped open with a stone. You peek inside and see a single room lit by the faint flicker of a dying fire. The shadows stretch across a packed earth floor scattered with rushes that have seen better days. A scent of smoke and herbs hangs in the air, soft but persistent. As you step back, your foot slips on a thin patch of frost, and you catch yourself on the edge of the wall. The moment reminds you just how treacherous even early winter can be. A little farther down the path, a butcher works quickly to preserve the last of the season's meat. Salt hangs heavy in the air, sharp and clean, and you can hear the rasp of his knife against the wooden table. It is a sound that feels too loud in the quiet afternoon. Every cut he makes is insurance against hunger. Out near the fields, the last of the geese flap noisily. As they are coaxed into their pens, the noise feels almost comical. A sudden burst of life against the encroaching stillness. It is one of those odd moments that sticks with you, a little pocket of humor tucked inside the seriousness of preparation. The birds honk with indignation, sounding like grumpy neighbors dragged into a situation they never agreed to. As you move through the settlement, you feel a soft migration happening all around you. Tools are cleaned and stored, fences mended, loose boards hammered back into place. It is a dance performed every year, refined by generations who understood the stakes. The days grow shorter with alarming speed. Each sunset seems to sneak up earlier than the day before. You catch the faint notes of a distant song drifting from another cottage. Someone is humming as they seal a window shutter with lumps of clay. The sound is lonely and soothing all at once. By the time the sun approaches the horizon, the sky is washed in pale lavender and deepening blue. You pull your cloak closer, noticing how the ends have stiffened with the cold. Your fingers ache even through your gloves. And yet, there is something beautiful here too. The air is crisp, clean in a way that feels almost medicinal. Smoke from dozens of small fires rises in straight, narrow threads, creating a faint veil over the village. It smells like pine resin and distant promise. You return to the center of the settlement where people gather near a communal fire. The flames crackle and spark, sending tiny embers drifting upward like wandering stars. You stand quietly, listening to fragments of conversation. Some speak of the coming cold with stoic acceptance, others with a hint of fear they would never admit openly. The fire warms your legs, but your back still feels the bite of the evening air. There is no escaping this duality. Warm in front, cold behind. A perfect metaphor for medieval life. As night settles in, you realize the truth that has been whispering to you all day. Winter is no mere inconvenience. It is the great test of endurance, resourcefulness, and community. And as you stand there among them, feeling the rhythm of their preparations, you begin to understand the quiet strength that kept these people alive through seasons that wanted nothing more than to claim them. You wake early the next morning to the gentle sound of frost cracking underfoot as the village begins its steady winter dance. The sky is a pale silver, the sort of color that promises nothing warm for the rest of the day. You step outside your sleeping space and immediately feel the cold press against your cheeks. It is not cruel yet, but it is firm, like a tap on the shoulder, reminding you that the season has officially taken charge. People move quickly, eyes focused, hands full. Today is all about stockpiling, storing, salting, sealing, and doing whatever is necessary before freezing weather closes the door on tasks that require bare fingers and working sunlight. You walk toward the center of the settlement where bundles of flax, barley, and rye have been stacked into impressive towers. They lean against each other like tired friends, trying to stay upright. A mainstream historical fact often noted by researchers is that families in the Middle Ages depended heavily on these preserved grains to survive winter. Months that could easily stretch 5 months or more. If the harvest failed or the storage was flawed, hunger would creep in with a speed that felt almost supernatural. You run your fingers across a bundle of dried stalks. The texture is sharp and papery, and a faint earthy smell rises from it, comforting in its simplicity. Nearby, you see a group of women working around steaming pots filled with meat. Salt glitters across the wooden tables in thick, crystalline trails. Someone tosses a handful onto a slab of pork, pressing it into the flesh with steady determination. A quirky tidbit you overhear from one of them is that the villagers sometimes added crushed juniper berries to the salt mix because they believed it gave the meat a protective spirit, as well as a better flavor. You imagine the taste, sharp and rainous, something that might brighten a dull winter meal just enough to make you forget the colorless landscape outside. You watch as one of the women checks a clay jar filled with lard. She dips her fingers inside, scoops up the pale substance, and seals it back with a strip of cloth. Every action is practiced. Every gesture has been refined over generations. They do not rush, yet they work with an intensity that shows how much depends on these moments. You help carry a basket of apples toward a small cellar entrance. The door squeals as it opens, revealing shelves lined with jars, dried herbs, and root vegetables. A breath of cool, dense air flows out, smelling faintly of damp soil and stored hopes. You descend the steps carefully, placing the basket on a shelf. It is dim inside, lit only by the narrow beam of daylight slipping through the cracked doorway. You glance around and see rows of onion strings hanging from the ceiling like ghostly garlands. Carrots sit packed in barrels of sand. Turnips are tucked into crates with straw. Historians still argue whether these storage techniques originated from trial and error, or if they were passed down from older agricultural traditions that stretched far beyond Western Europe. As you observe the careful arrangement, you can feel the accumulated wisdom in every placement. When you emerge back into the light, you hear the rhythmic chop of wood splitting. A man stands near a growing pile of logs, raising his axe with methodical precision. The scent of fresh-cut timber floats around you. Warm and rainous, firewood is not just fuel, it is winter insurance. Families gather far more than they think they will need. Then worry it still might not be enough. You pick up a few smaller branches and add them to a bundle being carried away. Your hands sting faintly from the cold, but the movement warms your fingers just enough to keep them flexible. As you walk through the village, you see someone spreading straw carefully around the base of their cottage. It creates a crude insulation barrier, trapping warmth and blocking drafts. The straw rustles softly as the wind flicks at it. Children run past you, carrying baskets filled with dried leaves to help cover the gaps in wooden walls. Their cheeks are bright pink from the cold, and their breaths puff into the air like tiny chimneys. Despite the seriousness of the work, they chatter cheerfully, their laughter echoing against the stone of nearby buildings. You pause beside a shed where someone is drying fish on long wooden racks. Thin white ice crystals begin forming along the edges of the fish, decorating them like accidental frost jewelry. It is strange, but also strangely beautiful. The person tending the racks tells you they will smoke part of the catch tomorrow, adding another layer of protection against spoilage. The smell of smoke will cling to everything, woven into clothing and hair until spring washes it away. You imagine walking through the village weeks from now, every house scented like a communal hearth. As midday approaches, the sun barely climbs above the roof lines. You feel the temperature drop even though it should be warming. Your breath thickens in the air. Someone rings a small bell to gather people near the grain barn. There is a quick community meeting about rationing. You approach the group quietly. They speak in hushed voices about oats, wheat, and barley. How much to grind, how much to save, how much to trade. Numbers drift through the cold air like fragile promises. The barn doors pulled open, and you peer inside to see sacks piled high, yet still somehow not high enough. Winter has a way of making abundance feel temporary. A pair of children try to roll a large barrel filled with dried peas across the yard. You step in to help guide it, hearing the soft rattle of legumes inside. It is a peaceful sound, like beans whispering encouragement. When the barrel settles into place, you feel a quiet satisfaction. Small victories matter in these moments. The sky dims further, and thin flakes of snow begin drifting down. Hardly noticeable at first, each flake melts on your cloak, leaving little dark dots of moisture that quickly fade. By late afternoon, smoke from hearth fires threads through the settlement. The smell is strong now, carrying hints of pine, oak, and even a little birch. You see someone sealing a storage box with melted beeswax, the warm scent of honey wafting into the air before the cold snaps it away. Another person wraps cloth around clay, jars to protect them from sudden temperature changes. Everything seems designed to shield food from winter's persistent attempts to steal it. You walk past a small shed with its door slightly ajar. Inside you see shelves filled with bundled herbs, sage, thyme, rosemary, and a few mysterious plants you do not recognize. Some are used for flavor, others for medicine. A woman sorting the bundles tells you that mint tea is believed to help warm the chest on frigid nights. She also mentions an odd belief that hanging a dried sprig of yarrow over the doorway keeps frost spirits from slipping inside. You raise an eyebrow silently, but she nods with complete confidence. You decide not to challenge her conviction. As evening approaches, the air grows so cold your breath feels like it might freeze halfway out of your lungs. People carry the last baskets into their homes. Doors close, shutters drop. The village becomes a cluster of quiet shapes under a thinning canopy of snow. You look up at the darkening sky and feel a mixture of awe and apprehension. Winter is no longer approaching. It is here settling its white cloak over everything you know. Inside the nearest cottage, you glimpse a family arranging their cellar keys, grain tallies, and stored goods list on a wooden shelf. Their movements are slow, almost ceremonial. This is the moment when they evaluate whether their preparations will hold. It is not fear exactly, more like acceptance. There is a certain peace in knowing you did everything possible before. The cold took charge. As you step away into the deepening dusk, you realize something important. Surviving the medieval winter begins long before the first snow. It begins with every stored root, every salted cut, every sealed jar. It is a season built on preparation. And now you are wrapped inside that world, watching it breathe and brace itself. You wake to the sound of wind pushing softly against the wooden walls. A gentle reminder that winter tightens its grip with each passing night. The world outside feels quieter today, as if everything has settled into its winter posture. When you step outside, the sky hangs low and pale, almost white, and the air carries that deep cold that seems to slip under your clothes, no matter how tightly you wrap them. Before you even take 5 steps, your boots crunch on a thin crust of ice that formed overnight. A crisp sound that feels both satisfying and slightly alarming. Today you will explore the inside of a medieval timber and thatch home, a place where survival is fought for one stubborn spark at a time. You approach a small cottage built of timber beams filled with WL and daub. The walls are a patchwork of earth tones cracked in places showing years of weather and hurried repairs. The thatched roof droops gently under the weight of frost, its edges bristling with tiny icicles. A small trail of smoke curls out of the chimney. It smells faintly of oak and leftover stew. You push the wooden door open and immediately feel a wave of warm air brush your face. It is not modern heating. It is not even truly warm, but compared to the outside, it feels like stepping into a cup of lukewarm tea after holding a block of ice. The room is dim. Only the fire in the hearth offers real light. Shadows cling stubbornly to the corners and rafters. The scent inside is a swirl of smoke. Damp straw, wool, and whatever meal was last cooked. Your eyes adjust slowly. You notice that the floor is not exactly a floor at all, but packed earth covered with an uneven layer of rushes. A mainstream historical fact often noted about medieval homes is that these rushes were replaced only a few times a year, so the floor absorbed a messy collection of crumbs, ashes, hair, herbs, and every stray thing that dropped. You catch a faint whiff of old rosemary and guess someone must have sprinkled herbs underfoot. To freshen the room a bit, you glance toward the small window on the far wall. It has no glass, only a shutter made of thin wooden planks. The edges are stuffed with wool and scraps of cloth to keep the wind from slipping through. You feel the faintest cold draft on your cheek as you walk past it. A reminder that insulation, as you know it, did not exist here. The cottage relies on layers of improvisation. Wool in the cracks, straw near the foundations. Spare clothing hung like tapestries along the walls to block the worst chills. It is a design held together by hope, habit, and whatever materials were available. A quirky detail you notice is a string of dried fish heads hanging near the hearth. You tilt your head in mild confusion until someone tells you the heads were believed to ward off mice and also serve as convenient fire starters. Whether this actually worked or was simply superstition mixed with practicality is unclear. You decide not to get too close because the smell is definitely not inviting. Still, it is one more reminder that every object in this room has at least 2 purposes. You move closer to the hearth, the warmest part of the home. Its fire crackles steadily, throwing a soft golden glow across the room. A clay pot rests in the embers, probably filled with some kind of pottage that will be eaten intermittently. Throughout the day, the heat feels good against your skin. You stretch your hands toward it, savoring the relief. Smoke curls lazily upward, escaping through a small vent hole in the roof. Some of the smoke lingers, blurring the air into a haze that smells lightly of charred wood and old stew. You blink a few times, trying to adjust. Near the hearth, a family gathers. They speak softly, conserving energy and breath. Silence seems to be the default setting of winter. You listen to the mother telling her children to keep their woolen shoes near the fire so they do not stiffen with cold. Her voice is gentle but firm. Historians still argue whether children spent most of their winter days inside or if they wandered out regularly to help with chores. As you watch them now, huddled close to the hearth with blankets draped around their shoulders, you can easily imagine that cold days were spent mostly indoors whenever possible. You notice the ceiling beams above you,